Hi, everyone. So we're going to a regulation panel on MiCAR. Very simple, the way that we built the panel as well. So MiCAR licensing journey and operating, sorry, to operating model reality and learning from jurisdictions. Three part of our panels, and that's how we're gonna operate our panels today. So my name is Hein. I'm from European Blockchain Convention and Digital Asset Forum. I've been working with a variety of people from banks, regulators, asset management, and cyberpunk crypto native people. And today I'm here moderating this panel. So first we want to welcome our speaker. We have Alireza from Deloitte. He's our super regulatory advisor, guidance CAS from within EU and outside of EU region. We also have Jack. This is the CEO of Bybit EU. So different perspective from building a company from the ground up from Bybit EU to be MiCAR license compliance. We also have here Davide from European Banking Authority, another perspective. We also have Stijn from Crypto Finance, who is probably one of the first company that have MiCAR license since January of 2025, if I'm not mistaken. And last but not least, we have Viktor, another perspective. So he's from a bank, a different way to get, the MiCAR license. So just going very quickly on our first question on the licensing journey. So Alireza, you've been guiding the MiCAR applications for across Germany, let's say Luxembourg, Ireland, and, you've been working with ADGM as well. So what is the biggest misconception firms come with when they start with their application?
So thank you, first of all, for having me here and to be amongst this great panel of speakers. So the biggest misconception is probably that, to getting a license in Europe, no matter if you're a bank and you're doing a simplified notification, I call it simplified, but it's not really that simple, or you're applying for a total new license like Bybit did in Austria, it is really hard work. It's not like in the US where you have the Genius Act and it's like a sandbox where you basically just notify the regulator and then you get the license. So it's really hard work. And there's no really like an arbitrage or something where you can say, oh, I'm going to Malta or I'm going to Gibraltar, I'm going to Austria, I'm going to get the license in an easier way. No, it's harmonized. So basically, no matter if you do it in Germany or you do it in Austria or you do it in Luxembourg, you need to complete the certain decks or documents which are required by ESMA and by the level 2 documentation, level 3 documentation. So it's all harmonized. It could be that maybe it's faster in Luxembourg or maybe it's faster in Austria, but if you look at the numbers, I think in Germany we have like 48 CASP, which is the biggest number. Some would say maybe German regulator is faster. So there's not really like a way of doing arbitrage with this license. Now it's harmonized in Europe and now it's one license.
Mike, a little bit. So for European Banking Authority, Davide, on the regulatory side, what does a strong and a weak application look like? Can you tell us more about that?
This is one. Yes, I agree with the message that was launched. In general, at DBA, we have a standing committee on crypto asset when we, let's say, assist a national competent authority in the assessment of the application that they receive. And what we can see at the moment is that there has been a shift compared to the previous year, where, let's say, the authorization was perceived as a starting point to start building control compliance. Well, nowadays, and this is a very good signal, is that authorization is actually an attestation that compliance is there since the very first day, because the supervisor will ask himself, let's say as a first question, if this project is going to be live tomorrow, will this project survive? Will this project survive in case of crisis, of stress events? So we need to be, let's say, sure that compliance is there from the very first day. Good application, let's say at the moment, and this is, let's say, very clear from the environment, let's say requires the acknowledgement that what you are offering is a tech product, a tech service. So all the tech engineering that is baking the product, but also the recognition that there are skills required, regulatory knowledge that might be more related to traditional financial services. So the recognition that there is a good liquidity management, good governance, and so aspects that are more related to the traditional financial services. In general, I mean, what I would say is that national competent authorities and the EBA for significant issuers, a message that I would like to launch, that we don't want this business to limit. Authorization should not be seen as a limit for firms to operate in this market. But we want this business actually to grow as much as possible, and to allow this, we need to have a solid foundation. So we cannot allow that risk scales with the size of the business.
Thank you so much. Well, next, Stijn. Hi. So crypto finance is, as I said, one of the first company that get the MiCAR license in Europe. Do you think that's an advantage or not?
I would answer that with a clear yes. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. We were once amongst the first ones in Switzerland as well. We were amongst the first ones here in Germany. Well, we were BaFin licensed and then did the transition to MiCAR, so that was a bit easier. If you are pioneering a market, it's never easy, I would say, right? Not from a regulatory perspective, not from a legal perspective, and probably not from a market perspective either, but that's part of the game. It's good to be first because market share is divided now. Banks are pushing projects now. Well, since MiCAR went live, we are overwhelmed of new banks launching RFPs and RFIs and looking for service providers. So this is good. But there are huge differences across the European market. To think of MiCAR as one harmonized, nice market where everything is clear, that's not what I see every day, right? Hungary, crypto prohibited. Italy, not one MiCAR license live. Same in Greece. Germany, completely different picture. Same in Spain. A lot of market participant, top tier banks, live, of course. For me, at the end of the day, having that piece of regulation, whether it's hard or not, well, it's the barrier for market entry, which can be positive but also negative. But I think in the market that we are in the institutional sector, it's absolute given. I mean, if I do not play by the rules, a top-tier bank will not onboard me, right? And I would even say I get more pressure from clients than from regulators to play by the rules. And I'm talking here about TradFi rules that are known for centuries, right? I mean, this is not something new. I mean, we have to play by the book and we have to do it right. We have to manage risks, as said. What I don't understand personally is why a large top-tier banks in some countries, I mean, they have really the best of the best risk managers, compliance, lawyers, etc. They just don't get the MiCAR license or the notification through, right, with their regulators. Sometimes I think I would be very blunt here. In Italy, it's a bit more political. I would argue in Greece as well. And large pressure on Hungarian banks through politics as well, through the prohibition. So I don't think we're quite there yet. And also from an interpretation perspective, what we struggle with, every country makes a bit of a own gold plating on top. I would agree that the application forms are all the same. But it doesn't stop with that, right? Then you have questions and so forth. And that's where the difference then is made.
Thank you so much for insight. So another, you want to add something?
No.
Just quickly question to Bybit, because it's like a different way of getting the MiCAR license, because Bybit is a global exchange with, 72 million users. But I realized that you guys built Bybit EU from scratch. And could you tell me about the compliant project? How did you scope it, Jack?
Sure. So thank you, Han, also for having me here. First of all, I might maybe need to correct. I am not the EU CEO. I'm the CEO of Germany, exactly. So this is the responsibility. My responsibility is only the German market. But I still can give you some insights on how we made this possible. So first of all, I think it's important to mention that this was a strategic decision. So it was not an optional decision. So for Bybit, it was very clear from the beginning that either you get the MiCAR license or you will be gone by one day. So we took this as a priority, and MiCAR really forces you to think and act like a financial institution. So the question, like in general, really shifted from what product do we want to build more into the direction of what does the regulator expect us to build. And from there on, we knew, okay, exactly, we need to set up this EU entity. From the beginning, we set up local management, local decision makings, local responsibilities. And if you're coming from a global exchange with now almost 80 million users, you are used to fast and centralized decisions. But now you have this EU entity, which is a second entity, which is completely independent from the global entity. And now the challenge is not the work itself, it is more like doing everything or aligning everything at the same time. So I guess this one worked out very well. We were focusing exactly on this, and we focused on integrating the EU platform into the global platform without losing the independence. And this was the main strategy for us to really made it possible. And since last year, August, now we have the MiCAR license, and we are very happy about it.
Of course, to the last, Viktor, with the bank perspective, because you guys, as a bank, it's a big institution. Probably the way that you apply for MiCAR license different than a separate entity. Could you tell me more about that?
Yes, of course. A bank is a completely regulated institution. So for us, it was perhaps much easier. We did also the notification procedure, not a completely new application. And we were also one of the, we do trading. So we have the MiCAR license, execution of order for crypto assets on behalf of clients. So we're trading in our own name, but for the third party. And so we had all the documentation from the bank for the securities, like conflict of interest or execution, best execution, and so on. And this we can use also for the MiCAR application and to have modified them and special points. So that is what it's really easier for us.
Super, thank you so much. So once we get the license, we got here. So Stijn, I want to ask you, you have the license for more than a year now. What would be something that you would say that, once you get the license, nobody told you about before, and some like surprises on the way?
That's a difficult question. I mean, that was not our first license, so we knew. I mean, what's certainly something that I tell everybody that gets that license, or in general a license in the financial industry, but I guess that's in industries the same, is getting the license is not the hard part. Keeping it is. Right? Because in Germany you say Papier ist geduldig, but you have to live the processes, what you promise to the regulator, to your auditors, and you get tested on it. So I would say this is probably something that if you're a startup, that will surprise you after all. If you're more coming from the traditional world, you're used to that, and it will not surprise you. What surprised me, especially to MiCAR, was the market success. Because before MiCAR, we hardly got any banks to move into the space. And with MiCAR, that changed everything because you got that legal regulatory certainty. And from that pivotal moment, basically, all legal compliance and risk departments said, now we got rules. Okay, fine, let's go. Right? And that surprised me, to be honest.
Yeah, totally understand. I mean, I work with banks as well. For example, just asking someone to be a speaker, I I can tell you like, okay, we agree to go, but then I have to go through compliance and everything. But yeah, the next question is for you, Alireza, is, well, you work more with an advisor side. What do the clients tell you on, the problem? What is the most common issue that people come up with after the MiCA?
I mean, I would just double what Stijn just said. Getting the license is I mean, it's not easy, yeah, but it's also not giving you, in the end of the day, your business case. And if you do the application, you do it with a 3 years business plan, which you have the financials and you have the business structured, and it should actually follow exactly like the business plan. And many don't do it like this. And I mean, also what you said with the MiCA, the first CASP in Germany, which got the license. I don't want to say the name, but you probably know them. When they were leaving the EU, due to Brexit, I told them, come to Germany, get the license, and then when MiCA comes, you can do an upgrade to MiCA, and you can have like a population like the whole European Economic Area. And they did this. Yeah, they did this. They got the first license. But they left Germany. They left Germany for Luxembourg. They didn't leave it because they failed, but maybe because Germany wasn't the right jurisdiction to do that business. And this also comes with it. So if like the players come from Asia to Austria because they think Austria is a super hub to do crypto, we also have seen one of the first Asian exchanges getting the license in Austria and then losing their ML officer, losing their managing director. Now they had to stop the business. So these things are happening. So this is something where I'm saying, okay, you do the business plan, this you put in your application, and it shouldn't just be a piece of paper. The business plan you put there for 3 years, maybe for 5 years, this is something like the Bible. You should look at it and you should do it exactly like you put it in the business plan. This is what the regulator will challenge you with, and also the auditor. So in the end of the year, if the auditor is looking at your business and you have, I don't know, a full bouquet of licenses, and then they ask you, okay, how many of this business did you do? Oh, 0. Why 0? I mean, if then you giving back as an auditor to the regulator, and then the regulator looks at Article 74 of MiCA, which says, if the CASP did not do business within 12 months, you shall revoke the license. Many people don't know it, yeah. So you should really think twice when you apply in what business you apply for and what license you apply for if you really are going to do it in the next 3 years. And this is something which I see a lot. So yeah, I mean, it is not that easy to get a license. Yeah, but it's also more difficult to keep it. But there are lots of small pieces. I mean, we don't have enough time to go through all of that. Just to give you a glance, and that's what I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe to add to this, right? I mean, there are two sides of the passporting regime that we have in the EU, and at the same time, the regulatory arbitrage, right? If I'm an Italian bank and I want to offer crypto to my client, currently I can't because nobody will grant me the authority to do it. But at the same time, if I register a company in Lithuania, which is quite quickly done, and I get the MiCA license, I can service the whole EU, including the Italian market. So, and these are things that, from a market perspective, right, really don't go together.
Thank you. And I want to direct the question to Jack again. Same question. Do you think that is, elevate your business in German? How does it open, working with institution, with asset management?
Sure. So MiCA in general is shifting more like gives you the possibility to work with everybody, and really is changing the perception you are getting from the outside people. So first of all, before our regulation, we are always coming up to institutions or bank, as you just said, it's Stijn, and we were asking, hey, can we work together? And now, since we have the MiCA license, it is shifting more on how can we work together. So, for example, we are based in Austria, and we are working under the Austrian FMA, passported our license into Europe. And since then, it was for us very easy to work with institutions, with banking, with banks in general, with payment providers, and also with strategic decision makers, just because of the MiCA license. So this was by far the biggest advantage. And then I can also add that now we are all working under the EU framework, which is the MiCAR framework. So you exactly know, or you should know, what you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So for us, it's also a benefit to know the terms and conditions to work in this market. And we can scale more predictable through this. So this is a different advantage, and our business really improved through the MiCAR license, we can say this.
So we have Stijn, we have Jack talking a lot about working with banks before and after MiCAR. We're going to the banking area with Viktor. I have 4 questions for you. It's a bit long. So you're coming from a established bank, Baader Bank. So what is the practical implication of MiCAR that you've seen? Of course, like, again, do you see that it's easier or harder for you as a bank working with crypto native firm and other business partner, maybe more in the TradFi area, not DeFi? And of course, do you have the requirements such as best execution and complaints management? Does it been put into practice? And how significant is the additional lift for a bank that is already operate under strict regulatory requirements? So MiCAR, does it add, like the burdens? Did it make it align already with what you'd already done?
Long question, yeah. Perhaps first one, as a lawyer, it's really nice that we have from the MiCAR, because then we use, with the business partners, if we speak with them, then we use the same definitions. So because MiCAR, it has a lot of definitions, like, as I mentioned, our licensed execution of orders of crypto assets on behalf of clients. Say, if we speak with partners, then it's clear that we are doing trading, or if the other one do something others, then we have the same definition that make it easier also to do contracts. And the best execution or complaints management, perhaps you said, there we need the consent of our clients if we trading outside of a platform, but also we have to modify our execution policy from the securities perspective to the crypto perspective, to put them on our trading venues, for example. And your last question was?
Just more like if MiCAR adds, a burden to what you've been doing, or it's actually aligned with what you already planned before applying for MiCAR?
Yeah, it's a line.
Then the last question for Davide, for the regularization side. So EBA issues a no action letter last year in June on the PSD2 MiCAR overlap for e-money token, suggesting firms were generally caught in the middle. So is this MiCAR interaction with existing regulations still creating operational blind spot for compliant firms?
Yes, I mean, I think that the no action letter of last year is a consequence not of lack in the regulation, so we cannot speak about a lack in regulation, but overlap of 2 regulatory framework. And this is not the first time that this happens. This actually happens in some cases, and this is our role, is to provide guidance when there are this type of situation. And at that time, indeed, we recognized that there was an issue for firms, that this was affecting their daily activities. And what we provided was a sort of guidance-based, activity-based for the firm, in order to understand whether the regulatory framework applied was one or the other. We also recognize that a change in the business model would require some time. That's why this is the reason why there was a transition period that was granted until the beginning of March. And the following opinion that was published in February, targeting the national competent authority in this case, and on how to treat the firms that receive the authorization, those that are under application, and those that did not submit any application. In general, I think that this happens with MiCAR, but before happened with the banking regulation and with any other regulation. More than, as I said, lack in regulation, there are overlaps in some cases, and much more important, there are some maybe blind spots, supervisory or regulatory blind spot. And what we are doing now, actually to avoid the case that was previously mentioned, is to work on supervisory convergence so that to narrow this supervisory, let's say this blind spot in the regulation, and to, let's say, ensure to the maximum extent that the regulation is harmonized across the 27 member states.
Can I just ask you a follow-up on this? Can you give some insight how many jurisdictions, NCAs, are following your guidance? Because as I know from Germany, Germany was one of the first ones who said, yes, this is the way to go before even the timing has passed. You know, Germany straight said to all the NCAs, apply now before it's too late. I know that CSSF followed a little bit later. FMA was one of those, like Austria FMA, which was waiting until the end. Can you give us like an overview? Can you tell us if all the NCAs are following your guidance? So is in every jurisdiction within the European Economic Area now the requirement, if you do custody or transfer service on e-money token, that you need a payment license, like these two licenses as well? Or
This
how
is something
is it?
that I'm not following directly, so I cannot tell you which one is, let's say, the competent authorities that start following the most. If you want, we can follow bilaterally after the panel, no problem.
Conversation for after the panel. But yes, like going forward to, comparing MiCAR in Europe with other jurisdictions. So I'm starting with you. So on our calls, you mentioned that you work, with EU, within the EU, but also, for example, you would ADGM, VARA. Do you see any surprises when you work with people from other jurisdictions? And maybe something that make you think about MiCAR might be, should be designed differently?
Yes, I mean, definitely. If you just look at the business, where the business is moving, I'll give you just 3 examples. One is like the Middle East with VARA and ADGM. So VARA is for Dubai and ADGM is for Abu Dhabi. If you look at these jurisdictions, you can see that the law of VARA, the law on cryptocurrencies, not on security token, is very much similar to what we have with MiCAR. Some say they were orientating to Liechtenstein. I would say it was rather MiCAR, and you can also see it at the text. So what they're building up in Dubai is quite close to MiCAR, but it's not the same. But you can see that other jurisdictions are following our approach, and it's a similar thing. However, now moving a little bit to what is different, and I think the best way to describe that is also to look at the US with the Genius Act. I think honestly, the MiCAR regulation we have right now on stable coins is too tough. It's really too tough. I mean, how many asset reference token issuers do we have in the European Economic Area? You know the number? How many? How many regulated? Zero. Zero. There's zero. Yeah, there's zero. Yeah. So we have a law which basically allows you to issue asset reference token. The only one who tried to do that was Ethena, and I can say it publicly here because it's publicly available, and they got burned and blamed by BaFin totally. BaFin was saying that's a scam. They got blamed and burned. They're still existing. They're still there. They're the 5 biggest issuer of stablecoin. Yeah. And they're still active. So, but they're doing now more business in the US. Yeah, and at that time when they got blamed, they had 149 clients. Out of these 149 clients, 147 were corporates, institutionals. Only 7 were from Europe. Yeah, but still, we kicked them out of Europe. And this is because of the asset reference token issuance requirement, plus the German regulator and the European Commission, they had a total different view if it wasn't really an asset reference token or maybe it was an e-money token. So this is so complicated, like the NCA and the European Commission doesn't even align on what it was in the end of the day. And when we talk about that, we also talk about yield, so providing interest on your stablecoin. This is not allowed with stablecoins. This is not allowed with e-money token. But if you look at what the US is doing, and right now they're discussing that with the Clarity Act, if you should in some way have the ability to give to your users or to give to your market participants some kind of yield. I mean, as I said before, you have a business plan, 3 years. How do you want to really do business with you when you're not allowed to give out any yield, when you can only put 70% of that cash you got for your stable coins in some really secure assets? I mean, you see what Circle is doing, this issue of double issuance. Yeah, you have you have like 5% or 10% of euro-dominated stablecoins, and the rest is US. Why? Because the US market is the biggest market, plus the regulation is very liberal, and that's a true fact. Yeah, and you can say as much as you want from the European Central Bank saying, oh, this is not allowed, and the European Commission says, no, it is allowed. Look at the recital 54 of MiCAR. Yes, it is allowed, and this is something we really should think about. I mean, the CASP regulation is, I think, fine. We are good to go there, but a stablecoin regulation is a mess. So that's my view, my personal view, not from Deloitte, not from anyone else. My view.
Okay, stablecoin, check. So with Davide, you work with FSB, Basel committees. What are the regulators doing that Europe is looking forward to? Maybe some good points that maybe we can try to follow up with them.
Yes. I mean, if I can quickly react on
Pressure's on
this.
now.
No pressure. I think, I mean, this is your opinion, I think, is actually reflects some of the issues that are at the moment related to MiCAR. There are no issuer of asset reference token, but I think they are waiting for the technical standard, the reserve of asset, to be published by the Commission. I think that there are some provisions that can allow investment in certain things that is highly impactful for issuer of asset reference token. That's why I think there are still not. We know that there is something in the pipelines in Europe. In any case, as I said, there are blind spots. We need to work on supervisory convergence. There are also ingenious. So now with the OCC proposal, that's what the US did, is to try to cover some of these blind spots that there were ingenious before. In general, I mean, we sit in Basel. Also there, I mean, what I see that the main difficulties in most jurisdictions is to go from a high-level discussion to a concrete regulation. Now we have in Hong Kong a rule-based that was introduced that introduced expectation for the reserve funds, for the governance, so areas that are also covered in MiCAR. And this is something that from us that are here in Europe is very much welcome. Also the approach from the UK, I think, was a very good one. Is let's say a phase-in approach. They decided to scale the regulation together with the size of the business. And this is actually, I think, a very good approach to allow the business to grow. But this also, I think, is due because they arrived late after MiCAR, after the Genius. So what, let's say, I can say also about the Genius Act, now with the OCC proposal, they are trying to cover some of the blind spots that were there in MiCAR. And this is something that we are also trying to do at DBA now with the work on supervisory convergence. And global level, what we need to do, but this will require more time, is to ensure convergence not only in the supervision, but also in regulation, because now there is a lot of jurisdictional fragmentation, but this requires time, required a lot of time for the Basel Committee to ensure a sort of harmonization in banking. This is an all new business, and so there are, let's say, very challenging years to come for us on this aspect.
So actually, Stijn, I have a quick question for you as well, because you work with institutional clients across the globe, right? So you have the EU one with MiCAR. What about other clients? Do they see you having the MiCAR approved as like a sign of credibility? Is it like something complex? Can you let me know about it?
Well, depends where on the globe. I mean, in Europe, certainly it is a prerequisite to do business, obviously, right? In Switzerland, nobody cares because there I have the Swiss license, right? I was last week in Brazil. Very interesting to see that the Brazilian regulation is very similar. I mean, at the end of the day, every regulation has plus minus the same goal in financial services, right? But the way to achieve that goal might be different with some cultural aspects. From my perspective, I would say that MiCAR is quite an administrative heavy, like ein etwas größerer Papiertiger compared to other countries, but yeah, does it give me credibility outside of the EU? I would say in Latin America and certain countries it does. Argentina, for example, they very highly view MiCAR as an example. Also speaking to the Brazilian National Bank, so that I would say yes to. But then again, MiCAR at the same time, looking from the outside in, is quite protective, right? So the reverse solicitation that we had under MiFID II is much more restrictive now in the MiCAR, for example. At least that's our interpretation. So for outside companies doing business in the EU will be much harder. Nevertheless, it is an example in other countries, certainly, yes.
Great. So Victor, from the legal and also the banking perspective, do you see any patterns emerging from other jurisdictions that maybe would help MiCA evolution, maybe MiCA 2, perhaps?
No, not really. We should more look inside of MiCA. All of the panelists said something about other restrictions, but I would concentrate more on MiCA. For example, the market integration package from the European Commission from 4 December 2025. There were no adjustments to the MiCA. They say nothing. The only point was the supervision for all crypto asset service provider should be the ESMA, which is especially for small institutions really heavy and competitive, but perhaps it brings also chances. And if we look also back to the MiCA in jurisdictions in Europe, with the transition grandfathering period, it was like a disaster because one day was 6 months, the other one was 12 months, then 18 months, say, for example, France and Luxembourg is 18 months, Netherlands is 6 months, and here in Germany 12 months. So this was really a disaster that we have not equal transition period for all the European countries, and perhaps it's a learning for the other jurisdictions to do it equal.
Thank you. So Jack, final question. Andy, so from the market perspective, especially, you CEO of Germany, Bybit, do you see how, user and business partner react differently across European countries? So not just German, other jurisdictions, other countries as well within the MiCA.
Okay, out of a exchange perspective, there are big differences within Europe, I would say. So first of all, within Europe, you have different user behaviors and you have different trust levels as well as an exchange. So if you take a look in Germany or in general at the German market, with Switzerland and Austria included, you see that people are more risk conscious. So they are more likely to really care about where their assets are stored and where they are buying their crypto. So you can see that they tend to have the responsibility and they want to make sure that their assets are safe. But then on the other side, especially in the southern and eastern European side, you see that the people in those markets, they care more about fees, they care more about the product itself or the branding of the exchange or the liquidity, for example. So the regulation becomes secondary in those markets. And this is the challenge. As a global exchange, you are working under one framework, but you have not only one go-to strategy, one go-to-market strategy. So you need to find out, or you need to make sure that you are compliant everywhere, but that you are like from the beginning that you are communicating it differently in each market. And then on the other hand, we see that there's also a difference between B2B and B2C customers. So on the B2B side, we see that it's consistently valued that we are regulated. So we have only advantages through the regulation. There's not one institution or a business partner who was not happy with the MiCA license in general. But if you take a look at the B2C side, you have more of fragmented perception, to be honest. So you have on the one hand, as I said, you have the people who really care about the MiCA and care about a safe and sound asset storage, and they care about who's the partner, and for them it's a must-have to be regulated. But there are also people who are more privacy conscious, who don't really care about MiCA, who think that MiCA is a threat to them. and they want to stick more to the original basic concept of crypto in general with more privacy, and they don't want to give so many information. So in the B2C market, it is not so easy. You have two sides, but in general, in B2B, we see that there's a clear direction and shifting towards a positive trend. Yes.
Thank you so much. So we have a minute left. I want to have a quick question for everyone. So two things. Regarding the industry, can you tell us about, one thing that we are getting right and something that we need to fix? Yeah, just one by one.
I think one thing we're getting right, especially in Europe, is harmonization, and that crypto is a global thing. It's not to one country only. My expectation would be that it's not just for Europe, for the whole world, that we're going to have a harmonized level playing field. And things which we do not get right, can we say anything negative right now?
So from my perspective, what is going right is that the market becomes more professional through MiCAR in general. So it's good to have rules in line so that we have more clarity and transparency within the crypto market. This is by far a good thing, and this is becoming a competitor advantage as well, becoming MiCAR licensed. But on the other hand, I think you mentioned it, is we have the European Union sometimes focusing on making things too strict, too hard to access, too hard to enter. So it should become more easier in general. Of course, you still need to be compliant and you have to follow the rules, but you shouldn't make it so hard and not so strict, so that it's easier for the people to adapt to the rules in general. So they can work on that.
Yes, on a, let's say, good point. I think a lot of very good inputs from the discussion. I think that there is an acknowledgement that in Europe, for having lasting access in a regulated market, not only tech-related skills are required, but there is the need to meet towards the tech one and the financial regulatory one, and this is something that is recognized, and I'm very, very happy for this. Nothing to fix at the moment. I think there are many challenges ahead. For us, a regulator supervisor is to narrow this blind spot and doing it with, let's say, the minimum impact for the market players.
Well, the things that go right is the regulation itself, right? Having MiCAR is, I think, a great thing. Otherwise, I couldn't do business. I'm in the B2B business, and without a regulation, there would be no business for me. So this is a good thing. The other thing is certainly in the EU, over-regulation and making things so complicated that they become prohibitive, right? As you pointed out on the stablecoin, this is something that we really should have an eye on, because that kills innovation, and other countries are just faster moving the needle.
I'll make it short. Good is that we have MiCAR regulation, and they are also discussing the uniform supervision. Bad is our regulation. Thank you.
Thank you everyone so much. We are 2 minutes behind.